You're basically having people held accountable. And this philanthropist I was just mentioning, he spends as much time trying to figure out how to give his billions away as he did making it, to make sure that he's thinking about those individuals and not just rescuing them. Don't rob them of dignity, accountability, responsibility, productivity, but actually giving them a catalyst for them to do something extraordinary where they're feeling fulfilled and independent in their lives. How do you do that?
Welcome to Raw and Real Entrepreneurship, the show that dares to bring no-nonsense insight to those who have the courage to start, grow, and scale a business. I'm your host, Susan Sly. Well, hey, what's up, Raw and Real Entrepreneurs? I am so excited and honored to have this guest today. His book, The Breakthrough Experience, changed my life. I was in my early 30s, I was foraying into entrepreneurship and starting to have some early success. And like many of you, hit that, multiple six-figure level, but then I became stuck. And it was a friend of mine, a coach, who said, hey, why don't you read this book? And when I read this book, it was really transformed, to be quite candid. And I said, one day, I would really like to interview the author. So my guest today is considered one of the world's leading authorities on human behavior and leadership development. He is the founder of the global education organization, the Demartini Institute, which has over 72 courses on self-development, life mastery, and leadership in its extensive curriculum. In addition to his 42 years of cross-disciplinary research, and to look at him, if you're on YouTube, you'll be like, did you start as a toddler? He has published, check this out, 42 books on self-development and translated into 39 languages. His best-selling book, The Breakthrough Experience, is transformative. So you all need to go to Amazon right now and get a copy. He has been featured in a number of film documentaries, including The Secret, which, as many of you are aware, is such a phenomenal piece of work. The Opus, and Oh My God, alongside Ringo Starr, Seal, and Hugh Jackman. He's shared the stage with everyone. Sir Richard Branson, Deepak Chopra, and someone who is very near and dear to me before he passed, as many of you know, was a dear friend as well, Dr. Wayne Dyer. So Dr. John Demartini, thank you for being here on Raw and Real Entrepreneurship.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. So let me just jump in and ask you. I ask all of our guests, what was your first business you ever had?
Can I share the funny story?
Please.
I went to my dad when I was in 1963, because I'm going on 68 now. I've actually been teaching 50 years now, so that's a bit older than that intro. In 1963, I went to my dad. I said, Dad, I want to buy a baseball glove, a baseball bat, and a baseball. He said, fantastic, son. I said, so how do I earn that money to buy it? He says, well, did you mow the yard? Yes, sir. Did you edge the sidewalk and the driveway? Yes, sir. Did you pull the weeds? Yes, sir. Did you clip the hedges? Yes, sir. Did you sweep out the garage? Yes, sir. Did you do the tile on the house? Do you make sure it's properly positioned? Yes, sir. Did you shine my shoes? Yes, sir. He said, son, I don't have anything else that needs to be done. If you're going to earn some money, you're going to have to be of service to people. I suggest you go to the neighbors and see if there's anything that they need done that you could possibly do. I went, okay. So I went down the street and I looked at some yards that were needing some service. And I walked up to the Evans, which is a few doors down, and I knocked up the door, and I really didn't do a lot of planning. I just knocked up and I asked if there's anything I could do to mow or hedge or clip hedges or pull weeds or anything that I might be able to do, because my dad had taught me how to do all those things. He wanted to delegate that. And cheap labor. And so the lady said, yes, how much? And I didn't have any idea. And I just pulled out a number and they said, that sounds fair. So I spent the day getting, bee stings and blisters and sunburn. But I did all the work and I made a good chunk of money. And I went out and bought my baseball, my glove, and my bat. And I showed my dad that new baseball glove and bat. He goes, I see you got a baseball. What did you do? And I said, I went to the neighbors, like you said, and I did work. He said, what did you do? I said, I mowed and I edged and I clipped hedges. He said, what equipment did you use? And I said, well, the equipment in the garage. He said, well, son, you can't use equipment without negotiating a price because there's a depreciation schedule on that. And so let me tally up what that would be. And he said, well, you owe me $7.50. And I, well, I've already spent the money. He says, well, you got to pay your bills. You can't just spend all your money and not pay your bills. You have responsibilities. So you owe me $7.50. I went, oh. So then I went down to the yards and some other yards, and I started making some money, but I had to pay him that plus the new amount, which was eroding my profit margin. And it was a little more work and less return. And I still was good. I was making more money than the other kids. So then this guy came by on a bicycle. He's riding his bicycle while I was mowing this yard one time. And I said, how would you like to make 50 cents? And he said, well, that'd be great. And I said, if you push this mower and do this mowing, you got 50 cents. And the 50 cents was significant in those days. And he said, wow. And so I got 3 kids to mow and edge and sweep and rake. I got another 3 kids and another 3 kids. I got 9 kids. I borrowed the Zubrod's and the Mala's neighbors' equipment. They charged the same thing my dad did. So I knew what it was fixed. And I would collect the money, do the deals, collect the money. They would do the work. I would make sure everything was the way it was, the standards. And then at the end, I'd pay everybody off and pay my dad. And then I would take the money there and I could buy things. So I bought me a golf set and I bought me a bicycle and I bought these things. And I made a net at the end of the day, $45, which is around $600 a day for today's time. Mm-hmm. And so my dad was very inspired by it. He says, so son, you've got one thing you're forgetting. You need to learn to save. So he bought me as a gift a coin collection, these folding blue coin collection systems, and a piggy bank. Now, what's interesting is that piggy bank he never gave me a way of opening it. In my office in Houston, Texas, on the 52nd floor of a tall building, I've had an office for 36 years, that piggy bank sits there with the same exact coins from 1963 that have never been opened, as a metaphor to remind me to think long-term and to save and not just spend my money. And I can thank my dad for that, because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm very well off today because I was thinking long-term and invested long-term instead of immediate gratification. My dad then said to me, once he saw that I'd learned to save, I was able to produce. He says, now you have the final step in your independence. I'm going to give you total independence. You'll be able to go anywhere you want to go, anywhere on that bicycle. You only have one responsibility now at this house, and that is you have to be home by 9 o'clock at night. But in order to do that, you got to pay $7.50 a week to pay for food, clothing, and rent. And I said, to buy my freedom, that's worth it. So I paid $7.50 a week. I still netted profit, and I saved my money, and I had my little business. I had 9 employees. And I was netting, equivalent of about today's money, around $600 a day. And I bought myself the freedom to go and ride on my bicycle in any direction, 35 miles, and explore and buy the things that I wanted, and also pay for that. So it was my room. I was paying for rent. I could do whatever I wanted in my room. And my dad was trying to teach me about the real world. And so grateful my dad had that foresight.
John, that story is so incredible. And I used to have those folding blue books of coin collections too back in the day. And, as I'm really thinking about all of those lessons, and, my follow-up question is, you learned at a young age depreciation. I mean, there are people listening right now. If your first language isn't English, you might not know what depreciation is, but there are people in entrepreneurship right now in the United States, in Canada, Australia, who don't understand depreciation. You learn depreciation, you learn how to run a team, you learn how to organize, manage, save, pay your bills, understand all of this. So what was your next business from that, where you took all of these lessons and applied it as an adult?
Well, I didn't really start a further business. I was sort of vagabond, because when I was 9, I started riding my bicycle 35 miles. When I was 12, I started hopping trains to different cities. When I was 13, I started hitchhiking to different cities because you couldn't drive yet, and bicycles wouldn't take me 100 miles, so I had to hop trains. Then I started hitchhiking. At 14, I started hitchhiking across America to California, and I snuck into Mexico. I literally hitchhiked down to Mexico because I wanted to surf, because I that was my thing, surfing at the time. Texas wasn't the surf capital. So I hitchhiked to California at 14, down into Mexico. At 15, I made it myself to Hawaii. And I lived in Hawaii. I was a Hawaiian surf buff, And so I didn't have another career really starting, really. I mean, I kind of made surfboards. I was never great at that. I just surfed. I did little odd jobs to maintain my surfing because that's what I wanted to do. I didn't really start my real next business until I got in my earliest 20s. And then I started my speaking career. I actually started speaking at age 18, but I didn't make any money. I made maybe $2.50 for tutoring. That's about it. But I started my little entrepreneur speaking business. And at first I put a love donation out and nobody loved me. Then I said minimum love donation. Well, they minimally loved me. And I finally said $20 a session for a talk tonight. And people started paying. So I started making about $100,000 a year by the time I was 23 doing speaking. And that didn't stop. Here I'm, going on 68 and I'm still doing it. And so I just kept doing that. And the more I valued myself, the more opportunities kept growing. So people keep thinking, well, when I get these opportunities, then I'll value myself. It's the other way around. When you value yourself, you get opportunities. And so I took whatever I got and I saved it. And when you value yourself and pay yourself first, you get more opportunities to come to you. And so I started structuring it and I started to value myself. And the opportunities to speaking kept growing and they kept getting bigger. And then it went around the city, and then it went around the state, and then it went around the nation. And then now it's nearly 170 countries I've spoken in.
And transforming lives. And that to me is so fascinating because there are a lot of people who dabble. So you've been at this a very long time. I mean, speaking professionally.
This is my 50th year.
Yeah,
50th year of professional speaking.
And speaking, and even Wayne, we talked about Wayne Dyer in your intro, and Wayne, I remember, so clearly that, every endeavor he started with a very similar mindset. I'm just going to go out, I'm going to add value to people's lives, and I'm going to charge what I feel I'm worth. And as I grow, of course, I'm going to charge more, but my value is going to grow exponentially in terms of those lives. And one of the things I observe with people who don't make it in entrepreneurship is they get that completely backwards. So they're thinking about how much can I charge as opposed to how much value I can add. Can you speak to that? Because you are, in my humble opinion, I mean, and I've followed you for years, and even on this show, interviewed incredible entrepreneurs like Dave Asprey and Jesse Itzler and all these amazing thought leaders, coming back to the core principle of something you've spoken about often is about adding value. So can you speak to that? Speak to this person who's a startup founder. I work with a lot of tech founders. I'm a tech investor. Speak to the person about how do you add value when you're sitting there going, I need to bring some money in. I should be thinking about money first, not value first. How do you solve that dilemma?
Okay. I have to develop something, if you don't mind, because I think
Please.
It's worth putting it out there. We have times when we look down on people and exaggerate ourselves and puff ourselves up and go into pride, maybe arrogance, and think of ourselves more narcissistically than actually them. And we get into a kind of a careless mode, and we expect something for nothing, and we exaggerate ourselves. This is an imposter. This is not authentic. This is not who we are. This is not from our heart. This is a puffed up positioning, a superiority complex. We also have a time when we do the opposite. We kind of minimize ourselves. We look up to people. We minimize ourselves to them, go, wow, what they've done, I haven't done. And we now go into kind of a shame mode. We go into an altruism. We'll sacrifice for them. I mean, anybody who's been in a relationship with anybody, they know if they're infatuated with somebody, they'll sacrifice what's important to them to be with them for fear of loss of them temporarily. And then they'll eventually store up their resentments and say, dang, I did this for you. Now you owe me things. And the other side, we then get resentful, and then we talk down to them and expect them to live in our values. So anytime we minimize ourselves or exaggerate ourselves, we're not being ourselves. And when we minimize ourselves, we'll sacrifice our profits because we don't want to lose people. When we exaggerate ourselves, we'll not meet the needs of the customers because we're not thinking of them, we're thinking of ourselves. So if we think of them and not ourselves, or we think of ourselves, not them, neither one of them are sustainable. And so as long as we're under this vast, this volatility and this unstable persona and mask that we wear and cover up the real authentic self, we're going to get symptoms, feedback from our entrepreneur adventures to let us know we're not being true to ourselves. We're not being authentic. We're not being integral. We're minimizing ourselves to others or exaggerating ourselves to others. But when we actually go in and realize that the customer, the employee, the stakeholder, the shareholder, the people out there in the world are not greater or lesser than us, but are equals. Schopenhauer says that we become our true self to the degree that we make everyone else ourselves. Now we care and factor in their needs, their values, their priorities when we're pursuing our entrepreneurial adventure. But we're not doing it at our expense, and we're not doing ours at their expense. We're factoring them as equals. People want authentic people. And whatever's truly highest on our values is where we're most objective and most neutral and most caring, and we're most authentic. So finding out the thing that we can't wait to get up in the morning and do, and find out the people who can't wait to get that, and target that niche, what is that is truly meaningful that you would love to do. The most fulfilling thing in life is to solve a problem. And the bigger the problem of humanity, the greater the reward you get from humanity. So caring enough to have sustainable, fair exchange, which is the only thing that helps build long-term business. Every human being has within them what equity theory has, an internal Geiger counter for fair exchange. And when everybody feels that they're doing it, they want to continue doing business with them. If you try to get something for nothing, they don't want to continue. If you try to give something for nothing, you don't want to continue. But if you give something for something that's a fair exchange, you do it. But people want to know what's in it for me. And so if you care enough about humanity to find out what their needs are and focus on the thing that you can't wait to get up in the morning and do, so people can't wait to get up in the morning and be with you, you get your niche. So that's the most important thing. And that's why money is a measurement of authenticity. Because when you actually have sustainable fair exchange, you earn the greatest income, and you're being most rewarded, and you're being most authentic, and you're most inspired spontaneously to act. So your spiritual expression and your material manifestation are perfect reflections.
Money is a measure of authenticity. So what would it, I have so many questions from that, and I'm taking notes in my right hand. One of the things that comes up when you say that is, first, let's give some examples. You know so many incredible entrepreneurs. In your opinion, who is exemplary at this? Someone who is authentic as an entrepreneur?
Well, there's a gentleman who happens to live here on the ship that I live on, who is he's a billionaire, multi-billionaire. He spends most of his time figuring out how to be philanthropic today, but he has one of the most significant companies involved in the area of optical designs. And they call him the most grateful philanthropist on the planet. Forbes labeled him that just a couple of years ago. And I get to have breakfast and lunch with him and dinner with him regularly. He's very much a very dedicated man to serve vast numbers of people. And he's building universities. He's building medical education, research systems. He works with Bill Gates. He's done amazing things. Here's a good example of somebody who found out what he loved doing, pursued it relentlessly because he can't wait to get up in the morning and do it. You tap dance to work, as Buffett would describe. And he's thinking of people. He's thinking, what are the needs of the people? It's interesting. We finding that blend of thinking about other people, everybody who's concerned, is a huge transformation when people get that. And I was speaking at a church one time. They asked me to speak at this church, and I made a statement which shocked people. They probably would never ask me back. I said, if you're poor, it's because you're not caring about humanity. And they went, well, wait a minute now. I said, because if you're caring about humanity, you're going to find out one way or another how to be able to contribute to their lives, either directly or indirectly, with some product, service, or idea, and go out of your way to make a difference. And you're not just focusing on your own problems, you're focusing on how to solve theirs. If you don't fill your day with challenges that inspire you, your day fills up with challenges that don't. And the challenges that don't, that cause despair and, in a sense, distress, is a feedback from the universe to let you know you're not being authentic. You're thinking of yourself more than others, and it's time to care about someone else. And the moment you do, you get back on track, and all of a sudden you now start to flourish again. So the universe does a beautiful job at helping you, guide you by the events in your life. And I believe that every symptom in a business is a feedback to authenticity. It's just trying to get you back to authenticity. It's teaching you how to care, not careless, not careful, but caring. And that's what keeps rings on fingers in marriages too. Yeah. So just basically have a caring. And that means that you're not exaggerating you over them and not exaggerating them over you. You're not trying to get something for nothing or give something for nothing. You're not robbing people of dignity, accountable responsibility with altruistic fantasies. You're basically having people held accountable. And this philanthropist I was just mentioning, he spends as much time trying to figure out how to give his billions away as he did making it, to make sure that he's thinking about those individuals and not just rescuing them. Don't rob them of dignity, accountability, responsibility, productivity, but actually giving them a catalyst for them to do something extraordinary where they're feeling fulfilled and independent in their lives. How do you do that? And so he's very, very thoughtful of people's needs and the ramifications. If you give somebody money, what's going to happen to the family around them? Are they going to be now entitled? If you do this, are they going to lose incentive? He's caring about people to think about that when he's in philanthropic mode. It's very inspiring to watch.
As you're sharing that story, and thank you for that, it's one of the things that comes to mind is, so when John and I are doing the show, the war in Ukraine is going on. So depending when you're listening to it, I know many of you go back, we're at almost 300 episodes, or go back and listen. So during Elon Musk moves satellites over the Ukraine so they could have internet when the Russians knocked out their internet. And I think of Elon, and he's received a lot of criticism, and it's very easy for someone to criticize something they don't understand, right? And if anything, from your book, The Breakthrough Experience, is part of healing those perceptions, right? And so Elon moves these satellites with no expense to the Ukrainians. He takes on the expense. And some people would say he did it because he was a billionaire. And what I'm hearing you say, he's a billionaire because that's how he thinks.
The greater the challenge, the greater the problem that humanity has that you work on solving, the greater your life.
And so how does someone...
It was Seneca. It was Seneca, the Roman poet and philosopher and politician, said, you measure an individual by their most distant ends. So how big of space and time do they have in their mind? The magnitude of space and time within your innermost dominant thought determines the level of conscious evolution you've mastered. And if you're not being crucified, you're probably not on purpose. Because in the world, there's pairs of opposites in values and belief systems. And that's absolutely essential. Just like in the body, you have to have mitosis and growth and apoptosis and death, and parasympathetic and sympathetic. One's anabolic, one's catabolic. You have to have build and destroy in order to adapt to a changing environment. The world has to have pairs of opposite value systems in the world to adapt to an astronomical environment. This planet needs that for the radiation and everything. So an individual that rises in influence is going to be praised and reprimanded on equal scales. And whatever level of praise and reprimand that you allow into your life will determine the impact you have in your life. So if you're not being crucified, you're probably not on purpose. And the more the praise, the more the reprimand. If you want all this praise, but you don't want reprimand, you're only going to grow to the reprimand you can handle, because you're going to make a difference. And anybody that makes a difference is going to get first opposed, violently challenged, and eventually it becomes self-evident with a new paradigm. And you start a new culture. You're not following a culture, you're creating a culture. And anybody who creates a culture is an unborrowed visionary, the maverick, the misfit, as Jobs would say. And that individual that transforms society and that makes the biggest difference in the world.
And it's a privilege, and it's not easy. We were talking just before we started recording, and I was sharing with John, being in this place where only 2% of US based tech founders are women. And I've had some very interesting experiences and wall kicking moments. And then I step back and say, oh, how can I grow from this? Or how can I, so I'm turning 50 this year. And so my legacy vision is to be a stand for women in technology at this point in time. So inspire 1,000 women to start tech companies. It's a big vision. And really, I think about all the problems those companies are going to solve. And it's really cool to think about. And it's also something that does attract a lot of criticism as well. And it isn't easy. How do you suggest, because the wonderful thing about you is you understand the physical, the metaphysical, and the spiritual, and the balance. What advice can you give to an entrepreneur who is dealing with criticism? Maybe it's social media criticism. Maybe it's criticism from their partner. Why are you starting a business? Maybe it's colleagues, friends, family. How do you suggest they best handle it?
I'll make a statement that's probably going to knock people over for a second. As long as you're addicted to praise, criticism is going to hurt.
It's huge.
You will never get one without the other. So what I do is I as long as you have a perception you got to praise without a reprimand, you are conscious of the praise and unconscious of the reprimand, and you store that in the subconscious mind as an impulse to get that again, and it becomes sort of addicting. The same thing on criticism. If you get a criticism and you don't see the praise that's simultaneous, you create an instinct to avoid that, like a predator versus a prey, and now you avoid that. And so you're run externally by this world out there of avoiding criticism and looking for praise, which is futile. As the Buddha says, the desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is the source of human suffering. Because now you're trying to get a one-sided life instead of embracing the two sides and having mindful. Because as long as you're conscious of one side, not conscious of both sides, and value both sides as a way of keeping you authentic. See, if you get support, you tend to puff yourself up and lose your identity and your true identity. The second you get criticism, you get back down into who you are. And the second you get puffed up, the criticism is there to bring you back into equilibrium. And the second you go down, the support's there to try to lift you up. That's why you find out that people that get cocky, they get up the tall poppy syndrome brought down, and the people that are humble, they get lifted by society. Same in taxation. People that are very wealthy, they get more taxes. The people that are poor, they get less taxes. So nature equilibrates. The Emerson wrote a book on the laws of compensation, did a beautiful job on this to try to wake people up to this realization, this transcendental awareness. So what I do is I look at the moment I'm being criticized, I close my eyes and I go, where am I? When am I? Where is this now it's happening? When is this? What specifically are they doing? What trait, action, inaction are they doing? Verbal criticism. What's the context? What am I doing that's challenging their value, and where am I cocky to need this to be brought down into balance? And then I go, and who is praising me at this moment, locally or non-locally? And I'll find out that I'm addicted to a bunch of praise at work and I'm getting nailed at home, for instance. Yeah. I realize this person's trying to get me in authenticity. I'm puffed up and I need that to be brought back into equilibrium. So I ask, what specifically am I doing that's challenging them? Because they only criticize me because I'm challenging their value structure. Where am I cocky and where do I need to be brought back into equilibrium, humbled? And how is it serving me? I ask those three questions real quick. I have a method that I do that humble me. Can I share an interesting story? When this goes back 40 years now. So 40 years ago, I noticed that when I was in practice those days, some days I'd have this really powerful day, make a lot of income, see a lot of patients, get a lot of praise, really acknowledged. And by the end of the day, I'm like, touch me and you'll be healed. I mean, I'm like, puffed up and, just, King John or something, right? I'm puffed up a bit. And then I noticed I would drive home and my spouse would just nail me. just slam me back. And you forgot this, you didn't do this, something else, something. Oh, she's toxic. And I would basically judge her for being negative, right? And then I thought, wait a minute now. Whenever I'm puffed up, I'm getting that. And then when I was down, I have a day, I go, whoa, what a day. She'd be lifting me up, massaging my shoulders and stuff. And I'm going, what's going down? And then I started doing an experiment. I started to self-govern myself. Because I said, if you're not governed from within, you end up having to be governed from without. And the government from the out is the events in your life trying to get you back to authenticity. Because if you're not being authentic, you need to be put back into authenticity. So the universe works on that behalf. All your symptoms in your business and your social life are that, your family, it's all trying to get you authentic. The purpose of relationships is authenticity, not happiness, but authenticity. So what I did is I asked myself, and I still got those questions today on my computer. What name did I not use today with my patients? What staff member did I not thank? What procedure did I overlook? What birthday did I not acknowledge? What anniversary did I not thank? What procedure, what paperwork did I not complete? And I humbled myself. And I noticed that whenever I got back to authenticity, I had a tear of gratitude. A tear of gratitude, which is a confirmation I'm now me. And so I asked these questions before I go home. I didn't go home until I asked these questions. So I was actually grateful for the opportunity to serve and grateful for my clients and my staff. And I was back in equilibrium. I would drive home in that attitude. I had an amazing difference when I got home with my wife. It was like, whoa, there's some sort of quantum entanglement almost going on between my wife and I. When I'm cocky, she brings me down. When I'm humble, she lifts me up. And I'm doing the same to her. We're both keeping each other in authenticity. And if I had a really down day, what did I do? Who did I serve? What names did I remember? And I asked the reverse questions, and I did not go home until I was in a tear of gratitude. That way I can be thankful for my staff, thankful for my patients, thankful for my own work, thankful for everything that happened that day. Gratitude is a confirmation that you're seeing things authentically. And I don't mean thank you gratitude, but I mean a deep gratitude for seeing the pairs of opposites that nature's providing to guide us back into authenticity. And the moment I did that, I got love when I got back. And I realized, wow, I'm learning how to govern myself. And this is basically, and the second I did, I noticed the volatility. I looked at my stats and the volatility of my business instead of going up and down. Because if I came home cocky and she'd nail me, I'd have a poor sleep that night. I'd wake up trashed. I'd go there the next day, I'd go the other direction. And I'm letting the external world run me by my addiction to praise and my avoidance of criticism. And I then realized, wait a minute, these are mechanisms just to trying to keep me authentic. And when I brought myself into authenticity without having to wait and have the world to do it, I was in the flow. And that was, and my business stats showed steady growth. Because now I'm in sustainability. I'm not trying to get something for nothing. I'm not trying to give something for nothing. I'm just caring about all the people involved because I've got them on my list to make sure I'm cognizant of them and not just focusing on me. And when I did, my business went stable. And I valued myself to have my forced accelerated savings and investments. I valued my philanthropic. I valued my what I could do for clients. I valued their names. And I remember remembering their names. I'm remembering their birthdays and anniversaries, which made it special, which grew my business. I mean, I would call them and sing happy birthday to clients. And people thought, what? And they would tell, you got to hear this guy. They would take that and then the recording, they'd show it to people and I'd get new clients out of it because I was now balanced again. I had equanimity within myself and equity between myself and all the people that I was around. So then I really believe that the world and business is a magnificent pursuit of learning how to be authentic in a way that serves sustainably other people. And the reward is the financial return and the philanthropic impact you can make with that.
John, that is so profound. And and thank you for your humility, because that's what, people look at someone who's achieved what you've achieved and they can go into story, right? And we know when someone's in a story, they're either it's going to put them in a good state or it's going to put them in a negative state. But either way, there's a self-serving state there that's feeding something for them, right? And I love how you shared that. And the Apostle Paul said, I thank you for this thorn in my side, right? And that gratitude of especially in business and relationships, even with health, to sit there. I love what you said. You didn't leave until you had that tear of gratitude. Dave Asprey, and I'm sure you know this, so one of Dave's projects, because Dave is always biohacking, obviously. So he is doing gratitude research at one of his labs in California, and he has executives coming in. And one of the things he found was they actually, from their biofeedback, were not reaching the state of true gratitude. And so if anyone listening is familiar with David Hawkins' work, gratitude has such a high calibrated level of consciousness. And so someone can say, oh, John, thanks for being on the show, but to be moved to gratitude, to be profoundly impacted to the tear, right? So can you share, and I know, we're coming to the point at the end and there's so many things I want to ask you, but I'd love to hear from you in your definition, what does true gratitude look like?
Thank you for that question. That's a meaningful question to me.
Thank you.
We have a executive functioning center in the prefrontal cortex, where we're able to have inspired vision, strategic planning, executing plans, and self-governance. We also have a subcortical area, even though it's still in the telencephalon, that's called the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system. The executive center is what they call systems 2 thinking, where we're thinking before we react. And the amygdala is systems 1 thinking, we're reacting before we think. The amygdala wants to avoid predator and seek prey. It's in survival mode. And so it has impulses towards the food and instincts away from being eaten. So anything that supports its value has an impulse towards, anything that challenges values has an instinct away. And so from the amygdala's perspective, gratitude is when you support me, thank you. And it's a very superficial form. And it's easy to say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, when somebody's supporting you. But when they challenge you, you have a different 4-letter word for that one. It's a different statement, And so those are superficial forms that most people are confusing with gratitude. And so I use that as just the superficial gratitude. And then there's a deep grace. And I say grace, and there's a reason why I use the word grace. It's a gracias, it's a mercy, it's a state beyond that. When you actually see the pairs of opposites mindfully, both sides simultaneous, you see the supporter and the challenger. And the supporter is puffing you up, the challenge is bringing you down, and they're both there to keep you centered and authentic and keep you in your heart. And when you're able to take the challenges that you have and see that they're actually on the way, not in the way, and they're keeping you from your addiction with your amygdala to the praise and keeping you centered, being on a mission is different than a person who's trying to be good. It's not a moral hypocrisy. It's actually a man on a mission, I call it, a woman on a mission. In that mode, your autonomic nervous system, because when you're supported, your parasympathetic comes in, anabolic. When you're challenged, your sympathetic comes in, fight or flight, catabolic. When you put those in perfect balance, and they're not lateralized, polarized, they're balanced, you have a intracardiac reflex that's impacted in the brain and in the heart, that actually from the executive center to the heart is opened. And we have perfect rhythm in the heart. And we feel an opening in our heart. And we see the hidden order that's in the apparent chaos. And so the challenge that we thought was there, we now go, thank you. It's helping me authentic. It's helping me maximize my potential and maximize my contribution and service. I was addicted to my fantasy of being supported. I now see you're helping me be authentic. And you're in a state of grace. In that mode, the sympathetic nerve reflexes that go into the muscles and the parasympathetic balance, and the agonist and antagonist muscles between extensors and flexors and supinators and pronators, they all balance, and your body is gracefully able to move without trepidation. And so our body is in a state of grace when we're in a state of grace. And we're in a state of gratitude for the order as it is, not as we fantasizing wanting it. We're thankful as it is. Om Tat Sat, as the Gita said. Thankfulness for what is. Our human will is now matching what the theologians used to call what is, divine will. When we are infatuated with somebody, we want to change ourselves to be like them. When we're resentful of somebody, we want to change them to be like us. And we're ungrateful for our existence. When we're in balance, we're grateful for the opportunity to be of service to them in fair exchange. And we see the order. We realize that their challenges and feedback is guiding us to make a more powerful business. We need their criticism. We need the criticism from our staff. I got to show this. Jeff Bezos did a little video about Sony. I bet probably everybody's seen it. And he went on there and says, we wanted to be the customer-centric, company, exemplify that. And he did. He focused on the customer and he built this massive business. But then he realized recently that he was not putting that same focus on his employees as it was there. So what nature did is it brought in a union, a Teamsters union, to come in to say, we need a little bit more fair exchange. Now, you could see that as, oh, that's, those greedy son of guns or whatever. But no, if you're wise, you go, no, that's just letting you know that you're now focusing on the customer, but you're not focusing on the employees. So that's nature bringing in the employees to make sure that everybody's getting a win. So they want to go to work and serve more people. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you now realize there's other companies that go out of business because of that company. And so then the government comes in and says, no, we got to make sure that there's not an antitrust system here, no monopoly here. And so all the symptoms in business are feedback mechanisms to expand your conscious awareness of all the inclusive people instead of the people you're excluding. It's guiding you to master your life and master your spiritual quest and master your contribution on the planet. I really believe that every symptom is on the way, not in the way, and is part of your master plan that is inherently working itself through your existence.
John, wow. That wasn't a very eloquent response, but just wow. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for how you explained that. And I hope everyone listening is getting this feeling from John, because it's not even something easily describable. It's just a feeling that John radiates because as he shares his wisdom and understanding, there's obviously, for some of you, and please do write in, I'd love to hear from you, this awareness that's coming forth to say, oh, I've been out of alignment and that's why I'm stuck. And that the people, the critics, whoever it is that are coming in are putting me back in balance, putting me back in integrity, putting me back in authenticity, because that's where I'm going to begin to really grow. So my last question for you is around legacy. So you've accomplished so many things and you've transformed millions of people's lives, myself included. It was really, as I said, it was your book at that time in my life that really shifted the trajectory. And so thank you. Normally I'm not super emotional in a show, but I am with you. So, but what is your legacy? What are the next, 4+ decades? There's, there are people who are working on saying, hey, let's live to 150. There are people who are saying, hey, let's end poverty, or what is your legacy?
Well, I've learned at age 27, I bought this book called The Time Trap by Alec McKinsey. And from that exercise, I developed an exercise from that about prioritizing what I do every day and delegating everything else. So I'm pretty useless, except for teaching, researching, and writing. That's my core component. I haven't driven a car in 32 years. I haven't, cooked since I was 24. I jokingly say to my girlfriend, look, if I was to delegate my lovemaking to Hugh Jackman, would you still love me? And she says, absolutely. So I kind of delegate stuff. That's supposed to be a joke. I don't take that serious. But the point is that I delegate everything, and I'd rather surround myself with people that love doing what I would love to delegate. So I don't have to be burdened by anything other than what inspires me. I want to just do what inspires me, which is teach, research, and write. So I want to continue teaching, researching, and writing. And as long as there's any possible medium, podcasts, webinars, movies, books, I just signed a 20-book deal, 10 books with one company and 10 books with another. So there's 20 more books will become. So I'm constantly doing whatever I can to disseminate information and research and learn every imaginable thing that would maximize human awareness potential and the involvement of human consciousness and contribution from every possible discipline and field I can, and just continue disseminating information on that. And that's what I love doing, and that's what I will hope to do the rest of my life. I'm sure on my last day, I've asked people if I'm 100, would they come to a seminar, and they're all saying, we're waiting. So I'll probably be doing that. As long as this body's going, I'll be doing some sort of teaching and researching and writing.
Well, this is a topic for another day. My friend Mark Devine, who's been on the show, I was a student of David Hawkins, and Mark has read all of David's books, and so the ongoing debate we have is, will the consciousness exceed the body like it did with David, and then David died? And I believe that's what happened with Wayne. So the question is, in this quest for longevity, and are they approaching it in the wrong way and saying, oh, okay, if we do all the vitamins and the nootropics and we do all these things, because if the consciousness exceeds the body and it's the body, it doesn't matter. So that's a whole other topic of conversation. But John,
can I share one more story? Can I share one more story? Or do we have
you can
time?
share anything. Yes.
Okay. I was in Rome in 1999 teaching my signature program, The Breakthrough Experience, which I've now taught 1,143 times. And at the time, I had this magnificent breakthrough. They're a great group of people. And on the following day, a lovely lady named Antonella asked if she would like to have me taken through the city to see anything else I hadn't seen before I have to fly out that afternoon. I said, absolutely. So we went and spent the morning walking through Rome. And we came at the lunch period to a square that was roped off, about the size of sort of like the small football field. And it was all roped off, and it was covered in red rose petals. So we're talking about millions of red rose petals covering the square. In the center of the square was a bronze statue sitting on a marble base of Giordano Bruno, who is an astronomer, theologian, philosopher, 4 centuries earlier, who they burned at the stake for believing that we lived in an infinite universe with infinite worlds with infinite beings. There was no exoplanets known at the time. But now we know there's over 5,000 planets been discovered and identified, and continuing to grow. In the process of doing that, I saw that, and 400 years after he was burned at the stake, they're now honoring him as a genius 400 years ahead of his time. They're honoring him. Now, before he was burned at the stake for stating what was true, everything he said was true in those components they burned him for. Because he was such a renegade ahead of his times. He could see things that no people could see. He wrote a posthumous biography of how he wanted to be perceived 500 years into the future. So I read through this thing, and I realized, it brought me tears, because I realized this is now manifesting what he wrote. We go around and we say we're immortal souls, but so few people write immortal goals beyond their own mortality. So that night, I decided with tears in my eyes to write a posthumous biography. And it was one of those things like Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise. He was writing with tears in his eyes, and just one of those spontaneous writings. And it came out 23 pages of spontaneous writing. I mean, literally very fine print. Of how I wanted to be perceived 1,000 years from now. What would Wikipedia say? That kind of thing. And I wrote it all out, and it was very detailed. And I have been refining it since 1999. Every time I read it, I edit it, play with it, how I want to be perceived, the impact on it. Because I'm a believer that if you create a goal and get totally present with it, and when you write it, it feels it's immortal, and you feel it's impossible for you not to fulfill it. You feel it's your destiny. If you get it really clear, you manifest it. So I did that in 1999. 1 decade later, in 2009, I was asked to speak at the Milk Abbey, which is in Austria over the Danube. And this is a magnificent abbey. I mean, beautiful. And the chapels are like the Sistine Chapel. And there were 200 people in attendance. There were 12 speakers there. The Dalai Lama was there. Muhammad Yunus was there. Wolf Singer was there. Paul Nernst was there. These are great people that have left marks, Nobel Prize winners, etc. And they asked me to be one of those 12 speakers. And I was there to share my Demartini method on conflict resolution and how to transcend the perception of, conflict. Afterwards, after I did my presentation on Saturday night, they asked all the speakers to come into the library. So if you look up Milk Abbey Library, you'll see it. It's a magnificent room. It looks like the Sistine Chapel, books everywhere. And they put us in a semicircle and lined us up in a semicircle with all the 200 people there. The media was there. And they handed us a stainless steel cylinder that was about 12 inches long. And in there was scroll paper of 365 quotations extracted from some of my books and my Demartini method, which is on conflict resolution, calligraphied on scroll paper with a ribbon around it, put inside, vacuum sealed with there's no air, no bacteria. And they handed it to us. And then in a procession, we walked down to the Infinity of Divinity library room. At the end of that library, there's a special vaulted room where they open up the vault and they store scrolls to be stored for hundreds to thousands of years. And in there is a 12-foot Infinity of Divinity library shelf. And it was a completely blank shelf, and they asked, and I was the first one to be able to put it right directly into the center of the Infinity of Divinity. And I've been using the term Infinity of Divinity versus the Infinity of Humanity for 40 years, 45 years, speaking about it. And I couldn't believe that I got to put my mission statement, my message, my quotations into that place to be sealed for 1,000 years. So I'm a firm believer that if we actually set goals beyond our mortality, I wrote a book called The Secrets of Immortality. It's a little small book that I wrote in 7 days on how to immortalize your ideas, your business, your finances, your relationships, all areas of life. And I really believe that we don't give ourselves permission. Every time we live authentically, the space and time horizons in our life of what we want to envision and achieve grow and eventually reach beyond our life. And the moment we do, we're in such grace that our body maximizes eustress, not distress, and wellness. And the telomeres grow to expand our potential to live longer, to fulfill a longer vision. So I'm a firm believer of giving ourselves permission to shine, not shrink, and to live and do something that's inspiring, not despiring, and giving ourselves permission to contribute instead of just be immediate gratifying with the amygdala.
John, thank you for sharing that story and the visual of what you share, putting your works into this vault and thinking about someone 1,000 years from now taking that and, really thank you, because there are many things about the times we're living in now that perhaps we wouldn't want people 1,000 years in the future to say that marks this time. I think that it's so powerful that your words are going to be a shining light of marking this time in our history. So thank you, John. I cannot thank you enough. I mean, I feel so blessed and humbled. I've been looking forward to our talk for a very, very long time, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your vulnerability and your truth. And I know my husband listens to every episode, so he'll be the first to say he doesn't want Hugh Jackman to be his stand-in in our relationship. But don't worry, honey. No, it's after 20, almost 23 years. It's okay. You still have that that role. But thank you. And how would you like people to connect with you? You have some incredible free resources on your website. And I would love everyone to, John, I mean, you could spend the rest of your lifetime studying John's works. So drdemartini.com. So it's Dr. Dr, not written out, drdemartini.com. And follow John on Instagram and also Facebook. And he lives on a ship. And so he's traveling all the time. John, final words for everyone listening.
The magnificence of who you truly are is far greater than any fantasies about yourself that you impose on yourself. You don't need to compare yourself to any other human being. You just want to compare your own daily actions to what's truly deeply meaningful from your heart. That's where you'll give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and to do something magnificent in contribution. So just honor yourself. You don't want to be second at being somebody else, be first at being there.
Thank you. Well, everyone, this has been another episode of Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. And if you would love to share your thoughts and comments, please go ahead, go to susansly.com. I read all of your letters. So by all means, if this episode has been helpful, we would love for you to share it on social, tag us both on social. And with that, the goal of the show is always to keep it raw and real, to come from the heart, and know that as an entrepreneur, the climb is sometimes tough. But definitely those vistas, they're absolutely amazing. So thank you again, John, for being here. God bless to all of you. And I will see you in a future episode.
Thank you.